Okay then, so here is the very first book in the series. Now, the first thing to note is just how massive these hardback books are. I mean, it's difficult to tell really, but I mean, I've got big hands, and look, my hands don't even cover like halfway up the cover. So these really are your traditional sort of scrapbook size hardbacks. So I'm hoping, without too much trouble, that I can go through these and get pretty much the whole book in picture with a bit of luck. Now, I'm not going to go through every single page and dwell over every single image, because there's just too much to get through. And I'm sure that when you see these books, you're just going to want to rush out and get your own copies. Now, this is the Victorian one. As I said, this is like the first one chronologically in the series. So it looks at what packaging was around in the late 1880s, 1890s, 1900s, and then 1900 to 1910. So he's covering quite a large area there of years, but I guess this was the very earliest sort of origins of a lot of these things. This is like, you'll see themes as we go through these. So he'll have the comics and like newspapers of the period. He'll have like the tobacco, cooking things, cooking implements and things like that. So we'll just see as we go through these how the series progresses. Obviously a lot of this is vintage advertising, which is once again another fascinating subject. Robert Opie himself is still alive today. He's in his 70s. He first bought his earliest bit of packaging in 1964 apparently, and it was a pack of old munchies, and that was the start of him starting to compile this amazing catalogue of packaging. And these are the photos that I particularly like, because this shows he'll do a similar one of this sort of photo for each decade. Some of it is just astounding, really. There's early sort of Cadbury's stuff there. And I remember going to the Cadbury's Museum in Birmingham, and even they didn't have some of this stuff. I mean, they just didn't, or if they did, they didn't have it on display. But this is just a taster, really, looking at the very earliest examples of what would be in the later books. Like these here, this is the very early cigarettes and matchbooks and matchbooks covers. I mean, there can't be many of these lying around. The early cigarette packets, or cigarette tins even, and tobacco tins. Later on you'll see board games of the period and greeting cards. Just incredible, the collection, absolutely incredible. These are some jigsaws here, some very early turn of the century jigsaws. It's really nice. And once again, these are the pages that I really like, because these have been staged. So these are like, sorry, it's a bit reflective, that, but you can see these are ones which, he spent a lot of time setting the scene, as it were. They're really incredible. And some children's books of the period. Board games, early board games, which started to become very popular. Programs and theatre programs. Just what you would sort of expect from the Victorian era, people starting to go on holiday, little holiday brochures and things. So you get the idea. So this is the first book, which just looks at the Victorian era. And although not my favourite era by any means, I still find it fascinating, and it's worth having just to have the set, really. And this is quite interesting. She's got events of the down the spine here, events of the Victorian era, which is quite good, which he defines. Yep. So when Victoria came to the throne at 18 in 1837, right up to when she died in 1901. So that's basically the period, and just beyond that's covered in this first book. So that is the Victorian Scrapbook, and that's the first one in the series. New Cavendish books. These were first published in 1999. The good news is you can still get them today. They're still in print, and I will of course put links to these in the description down below, so you can go straight to the Robert Opie page on Amazon if you so wish. Now this is the second book. This is the 1910's scrapbook, and this is the one predominantly devoted to the decade of the Great War. There's a lot of World War One memorabilia in this particular one. It's fascinating. Also the decade when the Titanic sank. It's also a thicker book than the first one because there's just so much more in here to look at. And just similar sort of formats, you'll get to recognize exactly what's what. There's a contents page now, so it's got looking at coronation, fashion, house and home, groceries, suffragettes, all sorts. So he does like his royal commemoratives, and these are just some of the many patriotic issues that were around at the time. The early days of women's fashion. Things were starting to change, that's for sure. And I mean, the books are just fantastic in the way of social commentary more than anything. This is the 1910's larder. And just look at that. All those fantastic packages, and it's just so much to look at. You need to go through almost every page with a tooth comb. It's almost like Where's Wally for packaging. The early bird's custard up there. It's just incredible, absolutely incredible stuff. Thing on the suffragettes and the start of picture postcards, which were very prevalent during the First World War. I've got a few of those myself. And of course, what you will also find when you go through these books, you will start to see, not the first gramophones, you'll start to see stuff think, oh, you know, I really fancy sort of collecting those. There's tins for your stylus on your gramophone, and I've seen lots of people collect those. I think I've got that red one up there somewhere in one of my little collections somewhere, a gramophone tin. It's the early comics and magazines of the period. Obviously there's things like Punch, but there was lots of other ones around as well. These are the comics now from the period, Boy's Own and Penny Wonder, Chuckles, Boy's Journal. And he really does sort of rub it in, Robert Opie, by not just having all of these, but having the first issue of each one as well. And that's another trend that you'll find. So if there's like a collection of rare books or rare annuals or you know, just rare cars, he'll have the rarest, most desirable one on display in his pictures, not the most common one, which is like incredible. This is on Boy Scouts and scouting. Once again, early board games, another fascinating era, and there were so many back in this period. It's really, really good. I love the fact that he's got all these board games covered. The Strand War game. I said apologies for the slight reflection. These are good. So these are the early ball bearing puzzles. That one there, I had Silver Bullet, and I also had Trench Football at one point. These are sort of glass topped ball bearing puzzles. I used to collect those. I have since got rid of those in my collection, but I've got my 70s ones, the Pocketeers, which I have already filmed for the channel. Early nursing stuff. This is war-related posters. This is very, very good. So this is look at these, all different. These are like little. You would have them. You donate, and then you put a little one of these into your lapel, because they're all like got little pins on, for different charities and causes. These are some posters here, patriotic posters again of the period. Early Heath Robinson book, very, very rare, that particular book there. These are wartime picture postcards rather than military related ones. What's he going during the war period now? Fragments from France, which was Bruce Baumfather. He was the classic World War I cartoonist with some of his cartoons there. Even Bruce Baumfather Tommy there, very, very rare. Incredibly rare. But yeah, that's well worth looking at. Once again, the traditional cigarette page. This is very early cigarette packets from the 1910s. And you'll see these as cigarettes and tobacco. You will see this theme throughout the books. OXO, so another highly popular collectible subject is people collecting old OXO tins. And these were the very, very earliest ones from the First World War, where you actually, the OXO wasn't in cubes, you had to sort of make it up, and sort of rolled up. Look at the Zeppelins there, the dirigibles. Royal commemoratives again, so at the end of each book he does have a little look at the sort of Royal commemoratives. And there, that absolutely classic poster, Daddy, what did you do in the Great War? Trying to urge people to volunteer. So there we are, once again another fantastic book there. Great book on the Titanic there as well. Superb, really interesting period in British history there, and that's certainly one that I find fascinating. So now we move on to the 1920s. A fantastic, beautiful cover on this one. And there's the back cover for you to have a look at. This one came out in 2003. I don't believe they came out in chronological order, but I have got them all now. I think Robert Opie's first book was one called Sweet Memories, and it was just concentrating on vintage sweet packaging. And it was only a very small little book, nothing as lavish as these, which is one I haven't actually got. However, after the annual sort of scrapbooks looking at each decade, he did do one book called, which I have got, called Remember When. And that sort of looks at all eras, and that does go a little bit later into the very early 80s, which sadly have not been done in a scrapbook style, which is a shame, because certainly there's enough time. They could do the 80s and 90s, I would think, nowadays, because enough time has actually passed. But anyway, this particular one then is the 1920s. So we'll have a little look at this and hopefully get through it. So there is the man himself, Robert Opie. He starts to appear in a few of the books. I said he's still around today. He did do, that's lovely, a Farewell to Arms hardback. He did do, as far as I know, Robert Opie, and I think I'm pretty sure they're still open. There's at least one packaging museum where you can actually go and visit this. So that might be something worth looking up. And if that's the case, I will put a link to the museum down below. So the 1920s kitchen larder. So you see some early crisp packets there. Once again, these tins and that, very similar to what we've seen before. Some OXO there, which is one of the brands I like, as well as HP sauce, which is another one. I love the old packaging on HP sauces. Double page of cigarettes now. So you see that these photos are done from overhead, and he's got the actual cigarette packets. So he must have an incredible collection of cigarette and tobacco packages, and they were a big part of people's lives back then. Virtually everybody smoked. Comedy postcards, those are quite nice, those Felix ones. Felix the cat, highly popular character back in those days. And then down below here you've got Bonzo the dog, and like a bulldog, another very popular character in British history. Really collectible sets of cards, those. Women's sort of fashion magazines again. These are nice. These are sort of programs. That's actually like a tin of some sort. Jazz time toffees. Fantastic. So these are like biscuit tins and sweet cigarette tins, and sweet tins. They're just fantastic. Absolutely brilliant. So these are some of the magazines. These are magazines aimed at women by the look of it. of the period. Yeah, Modern Woman and Home Magazine, the start of women making homes, romance there. This is post First World War, and you got the sort of the sporting and boys newspapers and comics and magazines. These are the comics pages now. So these are the ones that would have been launched in the 1920s. Really nice selection of early comics there, fantastic stuff. These are the pages I like, once again, so these are shelves which have got his board games sort of on display, and they're just fantastic. I really like the Zeppelin at the top there as well, which is really good. Just fantastic. And these are the pages that you'll really sort of pore over. Just awesome. Early Hornby Clockwork Train. I mean, the value of some of this stuff now is just incredible. Early books here. So these are early comic annuals from the 1920s. Pip and Squeak. Felix again, as I said, very popular character. A few odd board games. Absolutely superb stuff. So we've got the start of movies now, of course. So you've got the early books on the cinema. Still, the talkies hadn't quite come in, I don't believe yet, but with the cinema there. More magazines and more board games there. The start of radio coming in, early radio stuff. And of course the birth of the Radio Times. This is a double page spread of all very, very early issues of the Radio Times, with a little bit of history there behind it. Once again, a highly collectible magazine, and I have actually done a couple of videos on Doctor Who Radio Times, which are already on the channel. Another great spread here. This is on the British exhibition, which was very, very big. It's 1924. This opened, and this is all memorabilia related to the British exhibition. Newspapers, periodicals of the time. Some of these not actually British. This is the rise of communism, you see. Red Star, these are all sort of Young Comrade. These are early communist propaganda newspapers that were published in the UK. Very, very interesting. And then this is the birth of, well, not the birth, but this is a selection of some of the broadsheets that were around at the time. Comes to the Daily Express, the Evening Standard. Fascinating stuff. And then, of course, this is another page I absolutely love. This has got early London Underground timetables. I find these absolutely fantastic in their own right. The design and history of the Underground is just so good. And I do have some separate books and some of my own collection of these early programs, which maybe I'll pull out and pop into a video on their own, as well as a couple of books very, very similar to this, looking at London Underground and early GWR memorabilia, and just fascinating. Stuff like this is just almost iconic now, these fantastic posters, and you can buy these from the London Transport Museum. They are superb. Of course, motorbikes now starting to come into play. BSA, so the early motorbikes. And then we've got the start of cars, of course, you know. So there's a few car-related magazines, a car board game there. And then when there's cars, there's motorsports. So this is racing cars, some brilliant racing car games, and more sort of advertising related to that. These are, once again, the rise of the huge aircraft, the dirigibles, which I find fascinating. Big cruise liners. I guess the world had got over the fact that the Titanic had gone down, and they were prepared to go on big cruise liners again. And people going to further afield. See some of these, I feel like Australia. Southern Railways there. Another beautiful sort of Art Deco style poster there. The railways. What an interesting decade the 20s was, wasn't it? However, I do think the 30s slightly edges it out. This is the 1930s scrapbook. It's the next to last one we're going to look at today. I've still got the 40s to come. Great stuff again, and it's a very, very similar format to what we're used to, what we've already seen, but that is fine by me. So hopefully we've got all that in the picture, because they are quite big, these books, as I could say. So here we are. Here's the sort of breakdown again, the contents page. It's just superb. The 1930s, this sort of pre-war period, was very, very interesting. There were a lot of deniers, people, and the start of new inventions and things like that. So you can see here the early Hoovers and fridges and things like that. They're just incredible. This is another beautiful, beautiful page. So you'll start to see a few more recognizable brands which started in the 1930s. The Lyle's Golden Strip, I mean, that's hardly changed to this day. There's early Heinz, they're Heinz oven baked beans. I don't know if you see that down there. Bourneville and Fry's chocolate. Some cereals up here, like your shredded wheat, very early cornflakes and Weetabix, porridge oats, Quaker oats. So a few little innovations coming into the British diet. The start of real treaty sort of chocolate stuff here. So just look at these little packets of Rolos, tiny little things, Kit Kats, chocolate, fried set of Jersey creams. Just fantastic to see some of these. And as I said, I did not see these in the Cadbury's Museum when I went there. Look at the Terry's All Gold there, and this is from the 1930s, and that's hardly changed today. So here's your domestic cleaning products, Brasso, for example, at the top there. And a lot of these sort of cleaning ones, Persil, Rinso. Good stuff. So ladies sort of beauty products now. So we've got down the bottom here these early talcum powder sort of displays here, and like stuff for your nails and things like that. The skin creams, and at the top there, very, very early toothpastes. There we are. And speaking to my dad, he says during this time when he was born, he can remember brushing your teeth with like salt. I mean, can you believe it? Awful. Women's magazines, Women and Home Building. Then women's fashion magazines as well from the periods. The 1930s was a period of high fashion. Then you got the men's side of it, and toddlers, so kids fashion as well, dressing the kids up. And just look at that selection of children's comics. What a decade it was for those, wasn't it? You got your Mickey Mouse Weekly, Wild West, Hotspur, Gem, the Beano and the Dandy were both launched. Interestingly, he's got numbers 2 of the Beano and number 2 of the Dandy. I wonder what happened to number 1s, if he's still got those. Tiny Tots, Puck, all good stuff. Hotspur. So we got some very early sort of toys and memorabilia, and Meccano there. Obviously the 1930s saw the early Disney films, so we got some memorabilia on Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs there. Early Monopoly at the top, football games, blow football. Some great stuff there. Some children's annuals there as well again, some Mickey Mouse annual, Pip and Squeak. Hornby sets, very, very early and massively collectible sets now. Some of these are in the thousands. Once again, looking at broadcasting, so you got issues of the Radio Times, going outdoors, open air, hiking. More car related memorabilia, booklets, things like that. Copies of Motor magazine. And obviously the styles have changed now to incorporate the 1930s vehicles. These are early holiday brochures. They're really, really nice, Art Deco style. These are all fantastic in their own right. Very, very distinctive style, and they're lovely, absolutely lovely. Here's some more for overseas. So the previous page was the UK. These are for overseas travellers. And people would go on excursions abroad or voyages. So these are for people going on cruise liners. Cunard there. White Star Line. Off to America. I mean, these are just beautiful, beautiful bits of history. Looking at flying now, so commercial flying had started to come in, so people could jet off. Traditional board game that went in with it. The cinema again, so the talkies were well and truly in evidence now, and some early movie stars like Clark Gable, for example, Wizard of Oz, Judy Garland. So these are film magazines of the period related to those movies. These are for the radio stars, so radio was bigger than ever, so you got copies of the Radio Times there, and Radio Fun for the youngsters. A few more radio mags. Amateur wireless for people tinkering with electronics. The cigarette page again, so once again another incredible selection of cigarette and tobacco memorabilia from the time. And then the early cigarette albums. So this is one with the cigarette cards in. There's Association Footballers. I bet you that's rather expensive. 1935 to 1936. A cigarette album with footballers in. Radio stars. Fantastic. Beautiful page, that one. Greetings cards. A Valentine's Day. First time we've seen that. And fireworks. So this is lots of people collect these early fireworks, and a lot of these designs haven't changed to this day, to be honest. The standard fireworks is still a brand that's known. Massive gaudy packaging on these, and I said these are still around today. Christmas crackers, Christmas cracker boxes. Look how brilliant these are. What designs, eh? Oh, who wonders what toys are inside them? Then the royalty bit, the royal commemoratives. Edward the 7th. Another page of royal commemoratives. Board games. I mean, just incredible. Absolutely incredible. And the final page there, looking at the newspapers of the day, the main events of the 1930s leading up to 1939, so the release of Gone with the Wind of the Wizard of Oz and the outbreak of the Second World War. So that is the 1930s scrapbook. So the last one we're going to look at in this video is the wartime scrapbooks. It says From Blitz to Victory, 1939 to 1945. And this one obviously looks at the Second World War years. Very, very similar style to what we're used to from the previous books, as you can see. And once again, a really fascinating period in British history. A lot of this stuff is very accessible to this day, if you wanted to track any of it down. And you might find that some things during this, you think, oh, they look so good, I'd like to get them today. Looking at the blackout. In women's weeklies, magazines, all looking at what they can do to help with the war effort. Early Ministry of Home Security poster there. Always carry your gas mask, and there is the gas mask, and then the children's version of the gas mask. Looking at your barrage balloons, and a couple of kids' books related to the barrage balloon. The Defence ABC painting book, another very rare children's book there. Some of these are still common to this day because they had such massive print runs. Things like this, the Battle of Britain, for example, issued by the Home Office. got a copy of that in my loft somewhere. ARP, so air raid precautions, what to do in the event of an air raid. Obviously anything from this period is very, very scarce, but if anyone's going to have it, Robert Opie is the wartime cigarette issues. So you see everything was affected by that. So because there were paper rationing, the boxes are not made of cardboard, they're sort of like wax paper. Some of them say war packaging on them, because that was just the what it was at the time. So this was not an age of affluence by any means. This was an age of scrimping and saving to get through the war, because it was pretty tough. So penguin up there, another very rare one, in fact. A wartime rare penguin goes for about £25–30. Wartime Christmas cards, women's fashion there. See, there just wasn't so much in this decade to show, because people were all in uniform. Fashion, I guess, became a bit of a backseat. Patriotic boys comics of the period would all be telling patriotic war stories. These were the next generation of soldiers, don't forget. 1940s board games, so these are all pretty much wartime related, and there's some real rare ones there, as you can imagine. Nice RAF book there. Oh, taking the mick out of Hitler, that was a common theme in some of these. Sort of music hall programs. These are aircraft recognition books. So those were the two that Penguin did during the war, Aircraft Recognition 1 and 2, which are very common, because they have massive print runs on those, and they were reprinted several times. But they're still fascinating to look at, the Penguin aircraft recognition books. Dig for Victory, well, we know all about that, and growing your own became very, very popular at this time as a way to keep yourself fed. This very, very interesting page. This is wartime chocolate bars and rations, so an early Mars bar there. I've shown in some of my Penguin videos at the back where they've got adverts where they've cut the Mars bar into segments to reward it for good work. Some things like Maltesers, for example, were sold in a little bag, so there isn't actually any sort of packaging that's survived, generally speaking, on those. Those are like sweet wrappers up the side there. I mean, just incredible. Look at that crunchy. So this is the first time we're seeing some of these, and they really are fascinating. There's Rolo there, a Rolo on the side. The Women's Land Army. ATS. It's RAF related and things related to the Home Guard. Wartime cartoons. Not quite to the extent of the First World War. This is quite interesting. This is a bit of the American influence. The Americans arrived in January 1941, and of course they brought their American brands with them. So, you know, you've got your Chesterfields, Lucky Strikes, Camels, and the cigarettes, and then Hershey bars and Nestle, Babe Ruth bars, and chewing gum, Wrigley's chewing gum there. So all of that came over when the Americans came to Britain prior to D-Day. Once again, these are little rewards that were given out if you made donations. That's one's there for relatives of the prisoners of war stuck overseas. The fact that those have even survived is just incredible. And then you've got your wartime larder. So a very, very difficult period in British history, but fascinating all the same to see what was around in the 1940s. So a few brands there. The first time I spotted Marmite in what would become a similar brand, and the Commons mustard there. Loads of stuff that you might recognise. Vim. And then you've got a look at the Radio Times, broadcasts, a bit of patriotic stuff again. And then this is interesting. So here's a space for your own family memories. So if you've got stuff or family photo during the war, that would be a good little spot to put it in. So there we are. So it's like a selection of like advertising, ration books, what to do in the event of an air raid, and just so much in there to look at. It just hours and hours. Okay then, so here we are with our second look at these fantastic Robert Opie scrapbooks. And once again, they're all beautiful, massive hardbacks, and they're just superb. So this is the post-Second World War period, the 1950s. And in this video in particular, there's stuff that, you know, potentially a lot of my viewers will actually remember now, possibly the older generation ever so slightly, but there's some really great stuff in here, and I think you're going to really love these. So this is the 1950s one, and you'll start to see a lot of recognizable brands, even though we are in actual fact talking 70 years ago now. And you'll start to see the beginning of advertising and science fiction and television. There's so much happened in the 1950s. Just incredible. This is a really good snapshot of that decade, just in this one with the Guinness advertising down here. You've got Dan Dare, Davy Crockett stuff for Western memorabilia. Obviously the Hornby trains we'd seen in the last video. Plasticine, I Spy books. There's so much. It's just incredible. This is a really good one, and well, they're all fantastic, but yeah, these 50s, 60s and 70s ones are just superb. Here we are. So start TVs, of course, you know, so this would be a typical living room, I guess, with a TV, and there's a little record player or tape deck of some sort there, a radio, there's a record player, sort of things that you might find in a home of this period. One thing that was certainly very big and in 1951 was the Festival of Britain. In 1851 there was the original Festival of Britain, and then they did it again in 1951. Both my parents went to the Festival of Britain, and I've got a little collection of Festival of Britain memorabilia myself. It's just a fascinating subject. I would have loved to have been around to have gone to it. All that's left now is Festival House. That still stands as like a theatre and event venue, but everything else was demolished. So they put up the display, and it was there, and people visited it. Most of the population visited it, and then it was demolished, which is a shame. And there's not even a lot of video footage of it, particularly in colour. Very little survives. It's very mysterious, I guess, because it was around for such a small amount of time. There wasn't a lot, but virtually every facet of life had something related to the Festival of Britain created for it. And that's why I love it, really. I got your royal commemoratives. So obviously it was the coronation in 1953, and Elizabeth II came to power, and there was an awful lot produced for that. That's a celebratory Kit Kat there from 1953. Just incredible. People were still doing up their homes. I remember this range of porcelain was only available through Woolworths. I remember moving into a bedsit in the late 80s, early 90s, and literally taking it over from the people who'd been there before, and they had sets of this in the cupboard. Incredible. They were still using it. Once again, the rise of domestic devices, fridges, kitchen utilities and hoovers and things like that were starting to become more commonplace. Practical householders, so people bought property and they started doing it up and creating homes themselves. This is the 1950s cupboard. So you've got the cereals along the top there again, so some interesting cereals. Early HP, Daddy sauce there, you know, ones that I really like, the HP stuff. Cheeselets, squashes and cordials there, early Lucasade. I mean, where did he get these things from? I just don't know. Pepsi, very early bottle of Pepsi there. Guinness, a can of Guinness there. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic when you think about it. This is the birth of frozen food. So people were starting to get freezers, and that's some early bird's eye products, Smedley's, things like that that you could put in your freezer. Dairy produce and ice creams. This is the start of it. Chocolate went to town, so I mean, fantastic chocolate bar wrappers there. Some really interesting ones again. So a few that I remember when I was growing up. Spangles. There's penguins. Look at those early penguin wrappers up there. Arrows. First time I think we've seen arrows. Fantastic. The chocolate pages on these are just astonishing. So we've got your domestic products now, cleaning, things like that. I think this is the first time I've seen Omo. So so the rumor goes, you know, a bored housewife, shall we say, would put a little box of Omo in her window and it would stand for Old Man Out, meaning she was up for a booty call, apparently, in the 50s and 60s. So there you go. Women's sort of bathroom products. Interesting stuff there. So we've got toothpastes again. There's some early like talc sets or soap sets like Hank, Noddy, talcum powder boxes and soaps here. Early Camay. Fantastic, aren't they? Sunglasses. This is ladies sort of accessories, shall we say. Copies of magazines of the time, the Picture Post, Woman's Realm, Vogue, early issues of Vogue there. So cigarettes, once again, still a huge part of the day-to-day life of British people. And there's a selection of new brands, I guess, that were introduced at the time. Early Marlboro packet there from the 1950s. I know they were around before then, but first time I think we've seen those. Fireworks again, so we saw those last time. This is another double page spread of 1950s fireworks, so different to the standard ones we saw last time. These are some of the hardback books that were around at the time. He's got a copy of Dr. No there by Ian Fleming, and the first Darling Buds of May, some famous five. Some of the more traditional annuals, Lion Annual, On the Beat with PC-49 from the Eagle, TV comic, of course. Rupert the Bear, Muffin the Mule, Andy Pandy, Noddy, Hank, all these things sort of came to be in the 1950s. This was their era, really. Here's some of the comics that were launched in the time. So obviously the most famous one being the Eagle, I guess, for sort of viewers of this channel. But there was other ones as well. There's Girl and Robin, and other ones continued, you know, Beano, Dandy, Topper, Beezer. They all carried on. This is a fantastic spread, particularly if you like a bit of sci-fi. So this is a page virtually devoted just to Dan Dare toys and collectibles. Really, really fantastic stuff. We don't see a lot of this around very often. I particularly like the ray gun up there. That's beautiful. The Dan Dare memorabilia really is great, and the strips are still fantastic. The stories are amazing. This is great. So it's got the first Subutio table football set up there, which is really good. Baco sets, Cisco Kid. I haven't seen, but I'm pretty sure they did start in the 50s. Lego. So we'll see if we come across any Lego. There's a Slinky. So Corgi and Dinky Toys, Matchbox, they all got very, very big in the 1950s, and they became a hobby for youngsters to collect with their pocket money. And in true Robert Opie style, he's got some fantastically rare examples on display. Everything is boxed. It's just phenomenal. That page alone is probably several £1,000s worth of stuff, if not more. Lovely to see. So this is TV tie-in memorabilia in the form of board games. The Hancock's board game up there is a particular favourite of mine. There's a Bilko board game at the top, another fairly common one there. Army game, Beat the Clock, Dixon of Dock Green, Archie Andrews, Wagon Train. Some good stuff, eh? Pelham Puppets. Zoo Quest, the David Attenborough series. Then we got more people buying new TVs. So this is advertising for new televisions that you can have in your home. Radio Times and TV Mirror. Now I still didn't have the TV Times, but the Radio Times are Hancock and Phil Silvers is early Benny Hill there. Fantastic stuff, absolutely brilliant. Bilko's still good today. Hancock especially good today, I think. Early car manual. So the Mini, of course, launched in 1959. You've got the Robin Reliant down here as well. Cycling, so rally bikes. And the joy of cycling. Scooters as well, which is quite nice. And sidecars. Going on holiday, so a few period 1950s booklets. Going to Butlins, for example. Butlins for your holiday. Then flying away for your holiday. Go to France, Italy, Spain. Good stuff. Well, obviously the birth of pop music was the 1950s, and such a huge period. I mean, that would be a book on its own really to do it justice, but you've got the sort of late 50s stars. Frank Sinatra was of course popular throughout the late 40s and early 50s, but you've got Elvis, Cliff Richard, of course, Duane Eddy, Doris Day, some of these huge names. Fantastic. Early Shirley Bassey there. Photoplay for the tying into the movies of the period, the 1950s. Have so many things come into their own. Marilyn Monroe, Lassie. It's just fantastic. And there's key events of the 1950s there. And more 1950s memorabilia. There's so much for the 50s onwards now, because society has changed and we are sort of buying this sort of stuff that it's, the 50s could have been 3 books, to be honest. There was so much released in it. The 60s this is probably my favorite book of the series. I love the 60s and 70s the most because it's the sort of period where I can most relate to, and there's some fantastic stuff in these. So let's just have a look. That was the cover to Electric Hendrix, which is a rare mail order Jimi Hendrix album, as I recall. Here we are. So, I mean, the 60s doesn't really need much introduction, does it? It's an era that had so many fantastic things start and continue throughout it. It's just incredible, and every page in here is just amazing. There is Robert Opie again. There he is, with some movie posters on the wall there. Goldfinger poster. One of those, an original one of those, is like about best part of £1,000 now. Some Carry On in 2001. Newspapers of the period. So this was the era of Free Love, the 60s, Man on the Moon. The Beatles. There's so many things related to the 60s. Kennedy's assassination. It's very difficult to cover it in just the one book, but he does give it a go. So this is Tableware from the 1960s. This is the start of the sort of like Greek key and things like that were prevalent for homemakers in the 1960s, and this leads into Practical Homemaker again, and the latest gadgets that were available in the 1960s household. There's your 1960s larder, and boy oh boy, it looks incredible, doesn't it? How times have changed. I particularly love the like the Ribena down there, Lucasade, Tizer, Corona, lemonade, fantastic stuff. Your instant sort of coffee, your baked beans and spaghetti hoops over there is just also fantastic. Farley's rusks for the little ones. These are also really good. The cereals at the top, and he really does go for it, doesn't he? Let me just zoom in on those. He's got your Joe 90 and Captain Scarlet, the little Thunderbirds, and Mr. Spock, Sugar Smacks there, Frosties. He really knows how to press the buttons. I mean, those few alone there, once again, best part of a couple of £1,000 easy for the originals of those. Just incredible. Another incredible page, and this is the chocolates of the period, and you'll recognize some of these. I think this is the first time I've spotted Twix, a Malteser wrapper, although these have been around before then. Smarties, just look at that early Smarties wrapper. These are just incredible, absolutely incredible. And then on the other side, some of the chocolate boxes like Jelly Babies and Milk Tray. Just amazing, absolutely amazing stuff. This is another page that I just love to death, and this has got sweet cigarette packets from the 1960s, and just look at them all. There's so many. It's fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And these are highly collectible nowadays, and just superb to look at. I absolutely love them. The sweet cigarette packets, they're really good, and they did carry on up into the 70s in actual fact. These are lolly wrappers, and there's some good ones there. Wool Skyray and Captain Scarlet. There's the little Daleks, Doctor Who one there, Man from U.N.C.L.E. They're really nice, those. Cigarette packets of the period, and they all sort of follow a theme, don't they, how the packaging has changed into the 1960s. The 1960s household products, so cleaning products, really bright. The actual packaging has got a lot brighter now. Toilet rolls there, Andrex toilet roll. This is nice. So look at how he's done these toothpastes. So look at them all with them popping out. How amazing is that? That's really nice. Just incredible. This is young girls' fashion bits as well. Fashion magazines, Twiggy, Cindy, of course, for the girls. They had the Cindy dolls. And here they are again. Cindy, Wendy, Barbie, Ken, Tressie. These are all a fantastic collection. In fact, look at what a fantastic collection of Barbie toys. They're really amazing. Now the women's mags of the period, fashion magazines. More the alternative, Oz, Private Eye was launched, of course. All highly collectible magazines now, psychedelic covers. Teenage magazines of the period, Boyfriend, Jackie, Girl, Marilyn, 19, look at that. Just incredible, aren't they? Radio Caroline, Teen Beats at Annuals, TV Times is now launched. Ready Steady Go, the Ready Steady Go book, that's quite common. Some good stuff though, all the same. Radio 1 is launched up there on the Radio Times. NME was around. The Hit Parade, the age of EPs, and the big groups. These are fantastic. I mean, what can you say? They're just really good. It was the period. This is just on the Beatles now, so this is a double page spread on Beatles and Beatles memorabilia, early singles, EPs, a bit of memorabilia as well. Beatles jigsaws, as the Corgi Yellow Submarine toy, the original one of that. John Lennon's hardback there in his own right. Sgt. Pepper, a Beatles guitar, a Beatles scrapbook. Nice Beatles memorabilia, really colourful. This is sort of the late 60s, 1967, 68 period with the peak of psychedelia, really. Rolling Stones, The Who, Pink Floyd, early Led Zepp, and of course Jimi Hendrix and Cream. Transistor radios, little pocket transistor radios, a fantastic collection of those. Once again, superb, and don't they look great? Absolutely love those. Coronation Street, the start of the soaps. So Coronation Street glasses there, and then jigsaws, very, very popular in their day. Copies of the radio and TV Times now. Some classic covers there, The Likely Lads. Not only, but also Decameron here. Adam Adamant. And this is a selection of movie posters. I don't know if he's actually got all these. I mean, they do look like actual, some of them are folded in that, so I'm assuming this is his collection of cool movie posters, and there's some real crackers in here. Looking at the Hammer, Dracula and Thunderbirds, Dr. Zhivago, Easy Rider, The Great Escape, Magnificent Seven. This is a nice spread which has got just on James Bond and James Bond collectibles, the Great Pan movie tie-ins, board games, figures. That's the Pan books down the bottom there. Little sets, some good stuff in there. James Bond and Odd Job Marx dolls, or Gilbert dolls rather. The Goldfinger, Corgi car. Some more catalogues, car catalogues and dinky catalogues there for the 60s. Once again, 60s touring, come abroad. Some early sun creams there, it's quite interesting, isn't it? Look at that Nivea. 60s comics, well, some might say that one of the most classic periods. It's got TV 21 there right in the middle, and TV comic, fantastic shoot. Just so many great comics of the period. Some 60s board games now, so Danger Man, early Scalextric set, a Dr. Kildare stethoscope. I mean, never seen one of those since. Just incredible. Triang, there's a early Action Man at the top there, which is quite nice with a little accessory set. First Action Man we've spotted. It wouldn't be a book like this without some Doctor Who, so they've got the Doctor Who ray gun at the top there. Dodge the Daleks game, a Dalek jigsaw, Radio Times. The Marx Clockwork Dalek painting book. Incredible Basil brush, some Flintstone stuff along the top there, and Huckleberry Hound. These are the Campbellwick Green Village Folk along there. I used to have a few of those. I don't think I had them all, but I had most of them. Man from U.N.C.L.E. Z cars, and the Magic Roundabout curtains down the side. And then, what a page this is, particularly if you're into my sort of stuff. All sort of Jerry Anderson related TV, memorabilia, supercar, Thunderbirds, Fireball XL5. How amazing is that? A really nice spread that. It looks fantastic, doesn't it? Just so much good stuff in here. Then you've got the sort of the science fiction, the robots, the space related stuff. Blast Off game is very popular. Outer Limits there. Man on the Moon, of course, you know, making all of this super popular. The rise of the British annual, 60s annual, so it's Supercar, Blue Peter, which we've done. The Avengers, Man from U.N.C.L.E. And then, of course, 66, can't forget, that was the year Britain won, England rather, won the World Cup. And there's some World Cup memorabilia as well. World Cup Willie, bits and bobs. Just fantastic. I think the 1960s one is possibly my favourite. Although the 1970s does come very close. So that's the one we'll look at next. So this is the 1970s scrapbook, and this is certainly one of the ones that I remember very well, because this was the year I was sort of growing up as a kid in the 1970s and early 80s, and there's a lot of stuff in here that I actually remember. This is the last of the year decade by decade books that have been done by Robert Opie to date. I mean, he didn't actually do the 1980s, which is a bit of a shame. So, fantastic. It was straight from the inside jacket with the chocolate bar wrappers there with John Pertwee on, and early Wombles chocolate wrappers and soaps. I think he was actively going out and picking up things at this time to enhance his collection. So, I mean, if you want, you could perhaps pause on each page because there's so much good stuff in here. I'm not going to be able to do every page justice in this video. Would go on forever. Walls, just there's so much. That's just Walls, Black Hole, and Look In, and Star Wars soaps. It's just amazing, isn't it? So there he is again, Robert Opie. He's done in his Sex Pistols t-shirt there. That's probably a very, if that's Vivienne Westwood, that's probably very, very expensive. Looking at these different t-shirts here. So that is looking at punk rock and the Sex Pistols, which was very much part of the 70s. Here he is with the introduction of decimalisation, getting rid of the old coin system and going to decimal. Once again, looking at the improvements that you could do around the home. And then there's your 70s larder. Fantastic stuff. So once again, along the top, he's got some lovely, the Sugar Smacks, Doctor Who, and he's got a Magic Roundabout, Ricicles up the top there. Alpum. It's the first time I remember seeing Fred the baker. Some lovely bottles down the bottom here, Tizer and Pepsi, Safeway lemonade, Floor. I mean, just incredible stuff. And the cans as well. So a really nice selection of early cans for like Coke and 7-Up, Lilt, and just incredible. Really, really good page that. But there's so much detail hidden away. Mr. Men, yogurt pots, for example. Remember those as a kid. This is really interesting. So this is a fantastic page looking at potato crisps. So this is the first time these have been covered, and there's some real good ones in here. Ringos, I remember as a kid, and Space Invaders, Atom Smashers, early Monster Munch, Kung Fui's. They're brilliant, isn't it? Absolutely fantastic. Once again, the chocolate page is a particular treat this time round with Texan bars, and you've got the like Mr. Men and some tie-in chocolate bars, which we haven't really had beforehand, tying in some of the Disney movies. Some great stuff here. Curly Whirly, look, 3p, Mr. Men bars. Really great stuff. There's your cigarettes of the period, so they've sort of all gone sort of upmarket and like gold in the packaging. I can certainly remember, you know, people having these packets when I was young. These are your domestic products for cleaning your house. I mean, a few standouts there. You got your Head and Shoulders, and then along the top there, those talcum powders tying in with various series, which is really nice as well. This is women's fashion, and young girls, teenage girls, Mary Quant and Lulu again still, or on the rise. BB. Great page, really. We haven't seen a lot of this, but this is your 70s platform shoes there for men and women. Just great to look at those. Women's fashion mags. You got your teenage mags here now, which are Jackie and Oh Boy, Blue Jeans, Mirabelle. And then that sort of leads into ABBA and the Bay City Rollers. Very popular back then. The Osmonds, of course, the boy bands, the Jacksons, Jackson 5, and the Partridge Family. Leading to the more mature stuff, so you got David Bowie, Queen, Status Quo, Slade, some Susie Quattro there right in the middle. Nice little selection of cool pop badges as well, which are really nice with the different groups on. Kate Bush there. Then you got the pop mags, so sort of the 70s, sort of start of the sort of progressive. You've got the Stones there with the zipper cover. Band on the Run, Eric Clapton. Some cool badges again. Santana, early Kiss. Then you got the later 70s, 77 upwards, 76, 77 with the punk rock era, the Sex Pistols, the Clash, the Buzzcocks. These are sort of influential magazines of the time. They include Rolling Stone in there, but there was others as well, very short-lived, a lot of these. Oz got cancelled. Then you had the Mexico 1970 World Cup, the launch of a few more comics. That Action I see is included there because it's a football-related one. There's Kevin Keegan. 70s cars, the launch of the great Ford Capri. There's the highway code for that year. I remember copies of that around. And look at the Confessions book, Confessions of a Driving Instructor. There's a little flyer for the Robert Opie series, and as I said, we've just about almost covered all of those now. Flying Abroad, Freddie Laker's Laker Airline and Concorde. Go to Longley. This is a nice page of Radio Times and TV Times covers. Some great ones there. The Three Doctors, It Ain't Half Hot Mum, The Two Ronnies, The Good Life was launched, Faulty Towers, Going Straight, the sequel to Porridge. Some great stuff there. The Professionals, I see. Kids Comics of the era, so there was some fantastic ones launched in the 1970s. I can't see 2000 AD, but that was launched there with Doctor Who Weekly, Star Wars Weekly, Target, Star-Lord, Action, some Warlord, some classic 1970s comics. Jet was another one. 70s annuals, so once again a great selection of stuff relating to the 70s TV shows and annuals. Seen most of those before, but they're interesting all the same. And then the 70s TV board games tie-ins. So you got the Colditz there, and Nationwide, the Sweeney, Kojak. I remember having that one as a kid. Mastermind, of course, another great series, the Mastermind games. The 70s toys, so we got the Dennis Fisher TARDIS and Talking Canine, the Doctor Who board game, Kaplunk, Paddington Bear, some James Bond bits, and Play School, Action Man again, Cindy, and Muhammad Ali doll up there, Kojak car. Of course, he does include the Star Wars, so he's got a nice selection of the 12-inch dolls and the Star Wars quad there. He hasn't put any of the smaller figures in it, maybe just because these are a bit more, you can just see these are a nice carded Mego there. Run a Star Trek annuals at the bottom. The rare Star Wars scrapbook, which is quite rare in the Black Hole collar forms. Another selection of movie posters from the period. So we've got Jaws and the James Bond films, Dirty Harry, Rollerball, Exorcist. So many great films in the 70s. 70s Royal Commemoratives. So these were the ones that were released for, a lot of them for the Queen's Silver Jubilee in 1977. Some great stuff there. So even now, very nostalgic for some. Newspapers of the period, so looking at the newspapers of the time, and then once again a selection of really cool character toys. The Abbott dolls there, Fonzie, Donna Marie Osmond, John Travolta, and the Muppet Show and the Wombles down the bottom there. So once again, that's a really great book, and that's the last one of the actual decade eras. All right, and then we have, however, got one more to go through, which is this, well, two more in fact. We've got the Royal Scrapbook, and then we've got his compilation one. So the last of the scrapbooks we're going to look at today is the Royal Scrapbook. So as you may have seen during the previous scrapbooks, each book he did actually include a section on Royal Commemoratives, and I think they did prove very popular because he's done a whole book related to the Royal Commemoratives. Now, it's an area that I don't really collect myself, but I do find it interesting all the same, and for the sake of completeness, I think it was worth just covering this this book as well as my look at all the Robert Opie scrapbooks. So I shall just fly through this one, but as you can see, it is a great little book if this is of interest, and it is fascinating to see how Royal Commemoratives have changed over the years, right up to today. In fact, you're still getting the Royal Commemoratives. It's not something that's ever gone away, and there's some real fascinating stuff in here, as you can see. Really, this would be a museum in itself when you think about it. That's fantastic stuff here. And I guess the Royal stuff did actually get saved perhaps a little bit more than some of the other disposable bits and pieces, except maybe any of the consumable stuff, because I would imagine that would have got eaten, but they would have kept like biscuit tins and things like that, you know. So once again, a really, really nice little selection of royalty related stuff to the British royal family, and certainly it really is an incredible collection when you think about it. Robert Opie deserves a medal for saving all this and pulling it all together for the nation, because who else has ever attempted such a thing? It's just incredible. Great stuff, right up to the 70s, the Charles and Diana wedding. Sorry, Andrew and Sarah Ferguson. This is pretty much as far as it goes, up to there. And then Diana passing away. So that's the royal one. And the last one I just wanted to show you very, very briefly was this one here. So this is not a scrapbook per se, but it is by Robert Opie. And this is, if you don't fancy getting all the scrapbooks, this is a good little one-off look at each decade. And this is the only book where he's gone into the 80s and 90s. So you can see it's very similar format to what we've been looking at here. And this is just all decades. And he does go into a bit more detail of certain ones, and it's quite nice to see like a one-off book with all of this on. So there's an awful lot in it. It's a few hundred pages, but once again, this is really, really well recommended, and it's quite nice if you haven't got the room or space or don't want to buy all the scrapbooks. This is a way to have a look at all the decades in sort of one easy volume. So we'll call it a day there. That's my look at my Robert Opie collection. They're fantastic books, aren't they? If you do fancy getting these, they are available from Amazon. They're all still in print now, so you can get them from Amazon or eBay. I'll put links down below to get your own copies. If you have enjoyed this video, do please give it a thumbs up. Do please consider subscribing for regular retro content. This is just the sort of thing I like to cover, and I hope you have enjoyed this video. Thanks once again for watching, and I shall look forward to seeing you again very soon. Bye.